American Experience is made possible by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to enhance public understanding of the role of technology. The foundation also seeks to portray the lives of the men and women engaged in scientific and technological pursuit.
At Liberty Mutual Insurance, we do everything we can to help prevent accidents and make America a safer place. Liberty Mutual is proud to support American Experience.
At the Scotts Company, we help make gardens more beautiful, lawns greener, trees taller. If there's a better business to be in, please let us know.
Major funding for this program was provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities and by the following. American Experience is also made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
April 24, 1785. I was called to Colonel Sewell's wife in Travail, stepped into the canoe, sunk in the mire. She was not so ill as to call in other assistance this day. I slept with her till about 1 in the morn, when she called her neighbours to her assistance. Mrs. Sewell was ill till 3 hours in the afternoon. Mrs. Brooks, Bilcher, Coleman, Pollard and Vos assisted us. She was, through divine assistance, made the living mother of a living son, her 3rd child. Colonel Sewell gave me 6 shillings 8 pence as a reward, conducted me over the river.
I don't know what Martha Ballard looked like. I still don't know, after all the years that I spent working with the diary.
Mrs. Vos and daughter, Nathan Howard,
I
returned
went to
from
Mr.
Boston.
Savage's.
She became for me a voice,
Sally Pierce.
Lad of Washington at supper here.
but that took a long time.
See her sister Peggy.
Lad of Washington ate supper
Finding
here.
very sick with the rash.
Hannah Cool going to
Came to
see her
Mr.
sister
Brooks.
Peggy, who is sick.
Got some cold water root. Cyrus was
Before she was a voice, she was a mark on a page. And I really began to learn about Martha Ballard through her marks, her scratching of a quill pen day after day after day for 27 years. My connection to the past, like any historian's, is through the stuff that's left behind. It's not an imaginative connection, although imagination is part of it. It's about documents. It's about sources. It's about clues. It's about the leavings, the shards, the remnants of people who once lived and don't live anymore. Without documents, there's no history. And women left very few documents behind. Reading the diary let me see a world that I hadn't seen before, but it was very difficult to work with. My first task was to try to find some way to create order out of just a succession of facts. Clarissa there, so she had company.
Silence. Mr. Ballard has gone east side of the river to collect taxes. I'm informed that John Brown is in jail for committing a rape on his own daughter of 11 years of age. July 4. Claire. Independence of America observed in this town. We baked a quarter of veil and began to spin our cotton.
At home, delivery, medical, visit. Overnight, church, baked, brewed, cleaned, garden, mend, sewed, spun, wove. Some other historians who had looked at this diary said, well, there were interesting parts, but it was filled with trivia. That's what I loved about it. The story was in the details.
July 23, 1787. Claire. The girls washed. Mrs. Ellis and Bolton here gave me some coffee, tea and sugar. They dined. I made a syrup for Mrs. Savage.
It's the dailiness of Martha's diary that helps us to understand the really important differences between the 18th century world and our own world, and what it means to be a woman in that world.
July 25. A shower this morn. Isaac Harden came for me to go and see his oldest son, sick with the rash. It is swelled on the neck. Mrs. Harris, Savage, and Foster there.
And Polly Savage, Polly Hamlin here. I'll have to have Savages are there. Isaac, little Isaac. Road horse.
A diary like this is just filled with names.
This is Aunt Lydia.
It's kind of like walking into a room and just seeing a bunch of strangers. You don't know who they are and not sure if you care.
So he's next door.
I had to get to know the people whose names were in the diary. I needed to know where they lived. I also needed to think about where they were economically.
2 oxen, 1 cow, 3 years old, and 2 swine.
Claire. I left Mrs. Hodge and infant cleverly at 9 hour in the morn. Called at Mr. Weston's, Pollard's, Mr. Foster, and Mr. Savage's.
Medical, and overnight. When I finally was able to connect Martha's work to her world, I could begin to create stories. And the first story had to do with her work as a healer. 6 overnight. Obviously, this is an epidemic.
Becky.
Mother.
Martha called it canker rash, which in more modern terms is scarlet fever. And it was life-threatening, and people were dying.
July 27th. Isaac Harden came for me. Says his child has the sore on its throat. Gave him some root and gargled his throat, which gave him great ease. Clare very pleasant. We killed a swine which weighed 174 pounds. I sorted it yesterday evening. I was called to see Mr. Savage just after. Find her very low. Sit up with her all night. She puked up a considerable quantity of phlegm, and seems some revived.
There were doctors in Martha's town, but she was usually the first one called. In 20th century terms, she was a physician, pharmacist, and nurse, as well as a midwife. She was also a good neighbor. You were never alone in time of illness, and that's a fundamental difference between her world and ours.
Okay, so we've got Martha going. Fosters to see Lydia.
As I began to map Martha's movements through the town, I found I could actually map the spread of the disease.
July 28th. Called to Reverend Mr. Foster to see him. Find him very sick with the rash.
Good. The rash is moving down. Open.
Your throat is red.
I must preach tomorrow.
Drink your tea, Mr. Foster.
Have you seen Peg Cool today?
She's near expiring.
Returned home to find Mr. Ballard and Dolly unwell. I bathed her feet and gave them some herb tea. I feel much fatigued myself. July 30. Mr. Williams has bled again and is very poorly. August 5. Clare Morn. I was called at 7 o'clock to Mrs. Howard's to see James, he being very sick with the canker rash. Tarried all night. Colonel Howard made me a present of 1 gallon rum and 2 pounds sugar on account of my attendance of his family in sickness.